The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lyons, I'm in your house.
We got it.
Yay, got it in one.
We did the thing.
Only took 3 takes.
Yeah. So, we played 2 video games.
2?
Just the 2.
Yeah, buy one, get one, man.
Yeah. So, we're going to try for this to do something different.
Yep.
So, I've been doing the mini reviews. I played Half-Life for this one. And instead of you reporting on the panoply, the gross Roman buffet of games that you play.
And gross not as in a large number of gross as in disgusting.
As in unbearable.
Yes.
Yeah. You specifically chose a game that is similar so that we could do like a little bit of comparison, right? How did they do this game in like one of its seminal earlier entries? And how did they do the game in like a much more recent entry? So that's what we're gonna do. So if you're not into that, I guess you could cut out before we even do any of the promo stuff. This is your time to go.
As long as you download the episode and we get all of our metrics, we're good.
Yeah,
you know?
Yes. This is the plus side of like really coarse analytics. Is like that's all we know.
Yep.
We know that somebody pulled the MP3 file off the server. That's it. And I'm fine with that because I'm not a creep.
Yep.
So
there you
like,
go.
That's all I need to know.
I mean, hey, we're laying out the buffet, and you either eat some or you don't. You know.
Yeah. So if you're into us trying random experiments on our 7-year-old podcast, holy crap.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Good for us.
I know, right? And I mean, there is substantially more gray in my beard than there was when we began.
Yeah.
You are much more bald.
A lot more. Yeah.
I'm the same amount of bald.
Yeah. I'm never going to update that show.
I was going to say,
never.
It will just be a memory of times past.
Yeah. So I am a lot more bald now. I was in a Zoom call recently at my job, and I have, like my short hair that I had, because I think it's a picture from when I got engaged. So I have like short, dark hair, and my beard is all dark instead of like half white. And somebody on the call said, "Wow, you have a lot more gray in your beard now than you do in like your profile photo." And I went, "Yep, that's the biggest difference."
I thought that they were going to say like, "Man, looking at your profile picture, does that picture just keep getting younger?"
Oh, if only.
Right?
Where is the checkbox in Zoom? The Dorian Gray feature.
Anyways, but yes.
Yeah. So if you're into this, you can support us by subscribing so that we get those sweet analytics numbers. Recommend the show to a friend or family. Leave us a rating or review. Links for all those things in the show notes. You can also just go to nostalgiagoggles.audio and fill out the contact form, recommend games, send us questions for safety goggles, all that good stuff. If you want to support us on Patreon, everybody who supports at any level gets the after show, which is just a when we do it more show thing that people can enjoy if they are Patreon subscribers. But if you go up to a high enough level, we will actually shout you out. So I thirst for our patrons.
Yes, you thirst for the first.
That wasn't even a Freudian slip. I do. I love them so much.
You do.
First, I need to thank our 4-bit portables, Martin, Joshua, Keith, and Brad.
Now we reckon for the second.
Our 8-bit classics, Jay Brent, Kevin, John, and Yarno.
And the third shall be heard.
And our 16-bit hero, Michael. Thank God you were here. We would not have been able to get that tight of timing over Zoom. It's not even close.
And for $1,000, we will write a screenplay for a TV show of your choice.
So an existing show.
Yes.
But we will write like a movie adaptation.
Right. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So it will be as good as we care to make it. So, probably pretty bad, but especially if you pick one that we don't know, because I'm not going to watch, 20 seasons of The Wire.
You're really selling this.
Yeah. Hey, no, I mean, I don't want to get sued, like it's only $1,000.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So we have a mailbag question. And I think I know how I'm going to answer this. You may actually need a second to think about this because this is not normally your domain.
Well, thank God we don't edit these.
No, we do not. It's all live to tape. So this question is, what was the first game you modded? And I thought I knew the answer right away. And then when I thought about it a little more, I was like, no, it goes further back.
Well, okay. Wait, rules question.
Yeah.
I always love it when we get really in depth on like what counts and what doesn't on these, because the nice people that ask these are probably just like, oh, this is fun. And we're like, no. No, we need precedent a mile long. And
I assume for anyone who would come back and ask a second question, that's what they're there for.
Right.
Yeah.
What Game Genie doesn't count?
Game Genie 100% counts, and Game Genie 100% is where my answer is going to be.
Well, then there we go. I was going to say, like, because if we say like modding video games, like what you think of when you think of modding, that's a different answer than like, because if you go with Game Genie, then we're way back.
Yeah, but this is actually part of what I thought was delightful about this, was because when I think modding, I think PC games, right? And I assume you do too.
Mm-hmm.
So
although I actually modded a PlayStation game.
I'm going to need to hear more about that in a second. So I went back to, I was like, oh, the first game that I think I ever did any modding with, because I don't do a ton,
right.
But the first game that I think I ever did any modding with would be the original Doom, right?
Yep.
Build your own wads, mess with the levels, right? Like move walls and crab around, right?
Yeah,
and I was like, that totally counts. That's modding, right? Even if I didn't do a lot, that would be the first game.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, Game Genie on Super Nintendo. So the first game I can remember modding, and I'm certain that this is not the very first one, but it would have been in the same era, so I'm going to say it counts. Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo, which is really Final Fantasy IV, because you could do things like infinity money, or like everyone starts at level 99, or you can't die, right? You have unlimited hit points or whatever, which caused delightful errors when you realize the way they actually would like play out certain sequences, because it's like, oh, in this scripted sequence the character has to die, and they can't. They're immortal, so the scene is just unpassable, right?
Nice.
And so like you got to have all those weird fun, like see how the logic of the game engine actually works when you try to break it, and it like gives you some insight into how literally the machine, but how the machine works, how the sausage is made. So I can't see any legitimate reason that Game Genie would not count. Were you modding on the original Nintendo? Because that would be even earlier. I don't think I had a regular Nintendo Game Genie. So
to two prongs on it, right? One is, so if Game Genie counts, right, then the one I had the clearest memory of, because I logically could assume I did ones earlier than this, but I would be basing it off of logic, not memory, right? To be like, oh, well, if I had a Game Genie and I had this game, why would I have not used it on this? But Super Mario Brothers 3.
Infinite P-Wings or something?
So yeah, you could do, a couple things. One, you could do Infinite P-Wings if you were a peasant. No, so what I did...
That's what the P stands for.
Well, what I did was, it was interesting because I remember there was like super jump, mega jump, and like ultra jump, right? You know, and ultra jump meant that like if you jumped, you could just clear the whole level from the beginning. You could just one giant superhero leap to the very end,
like
you
the
know?
Hulk.
Yeah, you know. And that was fun, but that would get a little tiresome. What it would also do is that because you can only put 3 codes in, if I remember correctly.
It was a small number.
Yes,
because I do remember there were certain games that one modification sometimes took up multiple lines, and you're like, oh, this is the expensive one.
This is the heavy one. So one of the lines was start, and there was start as, but then there was also start and stay as, like Hammer Mario or Frog Mario, or like or Tanuki Mario, like the ones where like you could maybe get those suits like once or twice in the whole game, but if you were that all the time, that was very joy-inducing.
Yes, I'm realizing my friend had a Nintendo Game Genie, and because when you just said like stay Hammer Mario all the time, I was like, yup.
Start and stay. Yep.
That I didn't own that, so that was definitely not where I started, but I do remember doing that because it broke the game in a way that still made it fun to play. Right? Because you could die, like you could fall in lava or fall in a pit and die, right? But you had like this weapon to interact with things where you were not normally expected to have it. Right.
Well, there's that. And also too, you still knew when you messed up, because if you got hit by an enemy, it would still do the poof of you losing the power up, and then you just stayed with the power up. So you still got a feel for like, oh man, I really was relying heavily on that. And then also there was the joy of like the Koopa walking up to you like, oh, I'm going to get you, Mario. And you're like, come at me, bro. Come on. This will end poorly for you. So that. The one that so then, after Game Genie, basically I modded nothing because I don't play console games, right? Except I did mod Borderlands 2 on the PlayStation, and it took some doing. And I'm kind of proud of this.
This would have been like PS3?
Yes. Yeah, if I remember correctly, yeah. So the reason why and this is not like a huge mod, but like what I did was because, there was a whole bunch of like awesome equipment, right? So I was highest level possible, right? I had my level 72 Krieg, and I was like, oh man, it'd be really cool if I could get like this, prismatic or legendary shield mixed with this thing. But the problem is its drop weight was super low, and I value my time. So I looked online and I found a way that you can basically take the save file off of the PlayStation, put it onto your computer, go find a specific file, replace it with a different file, and that gave you all of the specialty equipment that you wanted. And then you had to do a couple of other things and then load it back in. And so I just followed the instructions. But yeah, I was actually able to mod the PS3 version of Borderlands 2 so I could get all this cool stuff. That thoroughly broke the game. I became incredibly invincible, and then I was done.
So I thought you were going to say something else, and I was like, because I was thinking about you found an exploit that was like, oh, you can like make this treasure chest like regenerate infinitely.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Well,
but that's like an exploit, right? That's like a bug in the code.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have to take a file off and like put on your cool shades and, read green text on a black background to make changes like that, I would say that counts.
Yeah. Right. I mean, like I wasn't like changing the code myself. I basically like took the file off, replaced one file with another file. I mean, that feels like modding, right?
Oh, it totally is. And one of the biggest memories of modding that I have post Doom was Diablo, where you had the save file editor tools and it would pop open like, here's what's in your inventory, and you could modify things in place. You could add things and remove things and change how much gold you had. And that would also break the game in insane ways, because like you would load in and you accidentally put like way too much gold into your inventory, and then like you couldn't take it out because it didn't understand like how to subtract from like a broken number. And so you had to kind of be careful, right? You couldn't just set everything to all nines and be like, aha, I win, right? There were actually like limits. And that was, I get why someone would make that a core part of how they interact with games, but like you, I value my time.
Yep.
And part of me is like, no, I paid you to make the video game.
Well, and also too, like normally when I get into that type of thing, right, the Game Genie or whatever, that is my final phase of playing the game, right? Because it's like, all right, I've enjoyed the game. I now want to see what happens if you push this to its limit. What does that look and feel like? And then you're like, oh, cool. It's nice to like take out my little pea shooter and I shoot the big boss and it explodes in one hit. And you're like, yeah, okay, I'm done now. So, but speaking of, you played an unmodded version, or maybe a modded version of Half-Life.
Yeah, you don't know what I did.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about it. I did. So I think the way we're going to try to tackle this is I'll talk a bit about my experience with Half-Life, and then there will, I would expect pretty much all cases, be like a parallel in the game you played, the Outer Worlds.
Outer Worlds.
Not Outer Wilds. Outer Worlds.
Outer Worlds, not Outer Rim, not Outer Wilds.
Never going to get it straight. So fun facts for Half-Life. I played the official Valve version, which has technically had some updates, like it plays on widescreen and it's got updated textures and stuff. So, that's the official version. What do you want from me? It was November 8th, 1998, the original release on the PC. It has now been ported to some other places. Like it was in the orange box. We had it on the PS3 in our apartment when we lived together. So like it's been around, right? But it is one of those games that it wasn't necessarily the very first to do what it did, but it is a story-driven sci-fi first-person shooter that has like some destructible elements in the environment, and a lot of modern games could probably point to Half-Life as a specific inspiration, right? Like Doom is obviously the forebearer of like all modern first-person shooters, but like Half-Life specifically had a story and persistent characters that mattered, and like a world where the world you were in was relevant for like emotional reasons, right? There's only one emotion in Doom, and it's anger,
Right.
which is fine. But
Yeah.
like Doom was not trying to say like you could make this into a movie and it would still be interesting, right? Like we know what the Doom movie was like.
And they were like, hey, we got to find a plot for this.
Yeah. Oh no.
I played Spacer's Choice version of Outer Worlds, and it was also a first-person shooter, narrative driven sci-fi game, right? Really, it was released by in 2019 by Obsidian, so we have a 25-year difference.
Yeah, that sounds like math.
Yeah, sure, ish. And thank God neither of us are scientists. And the top level description I would give for this one is that it is Fallout, but in space where capitalism is the villain, not war. So, and they do a great job like sticking to that narrative structure, So again, very similar in that it's narrative driven. You're not shooting people is part of the joy of it, but you are also there for the story, as opposed to your point Doom, where you're not there for the story, right? I mean, I think I been playing Doom for 5 years before I'm like, oh, I'm like a space marine? Neat.
Well, and it's like, I mean, the joke of Doom Guy is because they didn't name him.
Yeah.
He's
just Doom Guy.
So then let's break down kind of the audiovisual evolution over time, right? So obviously there's no comparison in fidelity. What Half-Life started a trend of, or at least started to make popular a trend of, is you had more realistic human models, big air quotes around realistic. And you have a lot of in-game dialogue. So you're walking around like before everything goes to hell, right? They're scientists and like they acknowledge you by name. They're like, hello, Gordon. Right. And so like you see the security guys and they're like, hello, Mr. Freeman. Right. And it's like, oh, so these two people have like different personalities because the scientists are my peers, but then security guards feel like we're like above them in the hierarchy of the company.
Right.
Right. So that's a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
But doing that at all first shows like a level of thoughtfulness about the world, and doing it in recorded like actual spoken dialogue makes it feel a little bit more immersive, right? So you're walking down the hall and you're not acknowledging this guy. He just happened to turn around when you're walking by and he's like, hey, good morning, Gordon. and you're just like, I mean, you can't respond. You're a silent protagonist, of course. But I think like that's now something we take so laughably for granted that it's, if you think back to someone who would have been playing this game in 98, you can kind of understand why they would be like, holy crap, that random NPC knew I was walking down the hallway.
What? Right? Yeah.
So now though, did you feel immersed in the world of Outer Worlds?
I very much so did, because I would definitely say that the role-playing aspect is one of the cornerstones that they really hit hard in this one. More specifically, they were, they gave you, as they do many times, where they give you multiple, dialogue options, right? But all the dialogue options, basically, I decided I'm going to be like Malcolm from Firefly,
Oh, good.
And so I was like, yeah, because it's corporations are like the bad guys, right? So I'm like, yeah, so I'm a thief with a heart of gold, but I don't let people know that I've got the heart of gold. I'm gruff, and there was always an option that I felt was relatively appropriate for that. So it was very immersive. The only downside I would say to the immersion of it, which again I totally understand because of budget, is that all of the NPCs are procedurally generated, like all of their movements and actions are procedurally generated, not like mocapped or anything like that. So definitely there were some times where the person turned to you and goes like, my God, and they're just kind of like flat faced, and you're like, your words are saying my God, but your body language says I'm the real villain because I planned this all along. Yeah.
Well, and this is like, going back in the other direction. I'm like, oh wow, in this game there's 30 minutes of recorded audio dialogue, and your game has so much recorded audio that they're like, we can't also do custom visuals for the thousands of hours of like recorded audio, because like every random shopkeeper talks, every janitor in the hallways talks, like everybody talks all the time, right? Huge cast, right? The cast of Half-Life is probably 5 people. I mean, literally, right? You have like every scientist there's 2, I think. So like every scientist sounds like one of 2 guys, right?
Yep, there you go.
And then like every security guard is literally the same security guard. You deal with some like government soldiers. They all sound the same, right? And then there's like a few named characters that are relevant, which the hero is not one of them. So that at least is probably similar to any modern RPG. But the problem of this person is running from a head crab for their life, and they're like, and it not looking like, you're scared? You're supposed to be scared?
Yeah.
The actor sounds a little scared. You don't look all that scared. That is unfortunately very familiar from a 1998 game to 2.5 decades later.
Right. Yeah. And especially because for the first time you're hearing any emotion at all, you're like, oh my God, there's so much emotion. And then now having actually gotten something to baseline it to. One of the other things I would say, this is kind of slightly unrelated, but that I think that, again, with the story driven thing, is that I would assume that your story was, this is very loosely related to audiovisual, but your story was probably fairly linear, right?
It is.
Yes. So one of the things that they did that I wanted to mention while I was thinking about it is that many times with many of like the side quests, they've got like 2 different mini factions arguing with each other. And normally each side quest has maybe like 3 quests associated with it, right? So quest 1, quest 2, quest 3, so when you do side quest 1-1, right, it's like, hey, these 2 people aren't getting along. Who are you going to side with, right? But the nice thing is they don't have to create any branches off that, because it doesn't matter. Whoever you ultimately side with, they give you a slightly different reward, but then they move on to the next thing. But it preps you for the last one, and on the last one, it does matter who you side with, because it will wipe out the other faction, or these people won't talk to you anymore, or whatever. And I liked that, because I feel like a lot of the times in modern video games, when they are nonlinear, they'll just like throw you into the mix and be like, make a big decision right now, go, go, go. As opposed to this one where it's like, hey, and if in about an hour, we're going to ask you to make a big decision, but here's some practice decisions so you can kind of feel out what's going to happen, Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate like doubling down, like developers over time, at least in some genres, right, have decided to double down on the immersive story part, right? And so the shooting is not that dissimilar. And the, running down hallways, killing monsters is not that dissimilar. And if it's got stats, leveling up your stats or getting better equipment, that's not that dissimilar from any game from any time in the 90s. But as they've been able to do more audio, more video, more mocap, more procedurally generated animations, more complicated dialogue trees, that they have tried to make that part of the world feel richer. I don't actually always agree that it's better, right? The Last of Us would not be better if you could decide to side with the surgeon. Like it wouldn't.
No, right? it would not be the game that it is, because the whole point of that game is the final decision that is made that you ostensibly but not actually make. Yeah, no, I think that it's definitely as the industry's gotten more mature, there are just more tools in the tool belt, and you need to say like, hey, this is the tool I'm going to use, right? So like it would feel in this game, it would feel really weird. Or you know what? A great example would be Mass Effect 3, right? Where it's just like, oh, hey man, you get to make all these decisions and all these choices. Are you Renegade or are you Paragon? And none of it matters in the end, because here's your ending, right? Like that was a huge letdown. But I'm sure that at the end of Half-Life, you weren't like, well, man, it's like none of my choices matters. What choices? You weren't there to make choices. You were there to watch the narrative.
Yeah, you shot the head crabs and you moved on with your life.
Yeah, I don't want to side with GLaDOS at the end of Portal. I want to see the narrative, right?
So taking us back to audiovisuals for a second. One thing that I really hope to hear has improved is anything you have to hear, because the sound effects in this game have aged like a fine baby's diaper. Just they're so tinny. And they're balanced so poorly. There's just to the point where I was struggling to make it sound tolerable, right? Like because you can turn music up and down and sound effects up and down, but that's all sound effects, right? You can't say like, I just want gunfire to be quieter. I just want whatever to be quieter. So maybe there's mods. But there were times where I would turn sound effects way down, but then there was things in the environment I needed to hear, like a monster sneaking up on me, or like, oh, this door opened and it's for like a little door puzzle thing that I'm doing, and I need to know that it's like slowly closing or whatever. So I basically just had to suffer with screechy, tinny sound effects. And maybe it's hard for me to test this. Maybe they sounded fine on PC speakers in 1998, but on my Steam Deck and on my gaming PC, everything was just scratchy and tinny and loud, just so loud.
Yes. Better for sure. Because if it wasn't, I don't think it would have sold anything, right? You know, at this point, that would be pretty unforgivable. Yes, it does do that. And actually, to kind of one of the points you were making is it does a good job, as many modern video games do, with prioritizing and ducking out things like as needed, and including. So one of the things that I think is great when you're trying to build an immersive environment is that you have two companions that are with you. You can actually choose to have none. You can choose to solo it, and there are some perks you can take that like help you do that. So I thought that was kind of cool. But in general, it is a good idea to have the companion. So I stuck with the first two because I was like, I don't know, they seem pretty neat. They'll chat with each other as you're walking around, right? Which I really enjoy because you get a feel for these characters without them saying like, hey, hold on, they got to say something.
Yeah. Ambient, passive, natural conversation is probably one of my favorite developments in modern RPGs.
Yes.
It just, please do not make me walk up to every person while they stand statue still and interact with them to figure out what their deal's about. Like, the fact that in Final Fantasy VII Remake series, like when you're walking through town, like you can overhear people talking to you. Like, I love that.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing. Actually, one of my great favorite examples of this recently was in Baldur's Gate 3. Shadowheart and Lae'zel don't like each other very much, and they eventually have a scene where like they really kind of get into it, right? And so then as you're walking around, they have this one ambient conversation where Shadowheart says like, "So Lae'zel, do you think we're ready to bury the axe?" And militant Lae'zel goes like, "Why would you bury a perfectly good axe?" You know? And she goes, "No, I meant," never mind. She goes, "I'm not sure why you're burying this axe, but if you need help burying it, I will help you." And I'm like, they are better, right? Like that's fun, right? Because it's like, oh, we got there, you know, like they're cool. So anyway, stuff like that. I say all of that though to say that all stops when bad guys start showing up or they start shooting at you. Like, so you're not like sitting there trying to figure out like where the gunfire is coming from or the mantises sneaking up on you. And also like your two idiot companions are like just shooting the shit as they're, you know, going on. Right. So that, to your point, right, is that like, and it seemed like what you were struggling with is that there were some sound effects that were annoying and pervasive and you couldn't just make them go away to focus on the things that matter. The game actually modulates that for you, you know, to a degree.
Well, and there's never really throwaway stuff happening. So it kind of all matters to a point, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's, you know, if you're crawling through a vent, it makes like creaking metal noises that are arguably like not required to be successful. But in general, like you're kind of alone in a deserted facility because monsters have come through portals, right? So like you're not walking around having conversations with people. You are trying to escape, then trying to deal with the government conspiracy to cover it up and the aliens that are trying to head crab on everybody's face. So like the fact that there are certain necessary sound effects that are annoying and that are making it unpleasant to listen for the other necessary sound effects is right. Like,
when I assume they're not coming through actual portals because that's Aperture technology, and this is Black Mesa.
Well, they aren't coming through portals that anyone built on purpose.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe things got really out of hand at Aperture Science. More so than we were aware. Do you have anything else on audiovisual?
I will just say that even then, I have to imagine that it was a little rough to have so few character models. Granted, it's only a problem for the first little bit because then most of the scientists, our corpses are gone completely, right? But that opening sequence is like really cinematic. You're on this long train ride where you can move, right? Kind of like the start of Portal where you're like in the pod. So it's like you can move on the little monorail thing, but you're just hearing like a voiceover and you're getting to see how big the facility is. It's very swooshy cinematic. But then you get in there and it's like, okay, there's like old white guy who kind of looks like an Einstein stereotype. There's old black guy who looks kind of like short cropped hair, and I think he has a mustache maybe. And then there's the security guard, and like there's a bunch of them, and they just all, sometimes you even see them in the same room, right? And you can tell they were thinking about individuality, and they were just working within the constraints they had, because like some of them talk to you a little bit different than others. I think it's like pseudo random and a little bit in response to how you're behaving. But like one guy, I walked through a room and he stopped to like tie his shoe.
Oh, nice.
Right. And I was just like, oh, that's incredibly thoughtful. I wish I could tell if you were the same guy I saw before, or if you're a clone, or if you are the only guy who works here and you just have a teleporter. Right. And so like, that's, I don't know, maybe in 1998, people were just like, yeah, whatever. They all look the same. They're all scientist A and scientist B. But like going back to that now, you walk out of one room into another and the exact same person is standing there. Like, my sensibilities have dulled to being able to tolerate that.
Yeah. I think on a similar last note for Spacer's Choice is that one of the things, so they have tons of character models as far as the eye can see. And I'm not 100% sure this is the case, but like one of the things that they don't really allow for, right, is that they've got like a whole bunch of presets, you know, for like what you can look like. And I believe you can manually mod those. But I say all of that to say that hair is a big one, right? You know, like what does your hair look like? And it always bums me out a little bit when NPCs can have hair that I can't have. I'm like, you got the model in there, man. Why can't I have that hair? You know, I don't know what that is, right? You know, but like, and especially for myself, because they'll be like, all right, man, there's 3 different types of beards. This one, and this one. I'm like, well, my beard doesn't look like that. And since I'm using a bald character model because I'm trying to make it look like me, I actually generally, because of that, I have, even in most modern games, I don't play as a guy anymore. I just play as a woman, because then I'm not even trying to like make it me. I am making another character, you know? But yeah, that was one where I was kind of walking through and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Why can't I look like that?
So if it was an MMO, I would tell you that it's because they will sell you those hairstyles.
Yeah, right. And then
but in a single player game, what's your excuse?
Yeah, right. I mean, like just give me it.
All right, let's talk about the gameplay. First person shooter, you know, walk around, point your gun at things and kill it. Half-Life famously had the crowbar weapon and the gravity gun, and like it's got some exotic stuff, right? That was like interesting for the time, and a bunch of modern things you could tell kind of based off that. But the gameplay, if you're being a prat about it, is really not that different from like Doom 1, right? You have kind of ebb and flow of, you move from space to space. There's enemies in this space, and then you move through an area and it's relaxed, and then there's some more enemies, and that, you know, kind of lather, rinse, repeat. One of the things Half-Life does that I thought was set it apart definitely from Doom, and also from some other first person shooters I've played, is there's a lot of thought put on navigating the environment, even in those like non-tense combat times. So getting from point A to point B is sometimes just walking down a straight hallway, but it is often like, oh, there's barricades because the scientist didn't want to be eaten by the head crabs.
Sure.
So you have
like
to.
You do.
Yeah, like, I mean, like any reasonable scientist would say, I saw him get eaten, and I used that data to support my hypothesis that I would not enjoy it.
All right, guys. I know we got the wall barricaded because that head crab ate that guy. But if we want statistically significant data, we need to sacrifice 20 more of you to go out there. And if it kills all 20 of you, we can say with 95% confidence that those head crabs are bad.
And when no one raises their hand, you're like, you're all fired.
Yeah, terrible scientists. You're all fired. Get out. And then you're watching them all get eaten by head crabs, and you're still taking your notes.
Yes, it's working. It's working. So what I mean by that is like, you know, barricaded, a room's barricaded and you need to get in there. And so you have your trusty crowbar. And one of the things that this game was one of the first to do is there are destructible parts of the environment. So you got to smash in a vent on like an air duct, right? You got to smash through some boards that were like hastily nailed up onto the door or whatever. And that I'll have more to say about that. But like, that is at least an interesting counterbalance to the more Doom style, like, shoot, walk in a straight line, shoot, walk in a straight line, shoot, right? So I did appreciate that the combat is still a big important part of it, but because they also teach you these skills to just navigate the map, then later they start to make you do those things at the same time, where it's like, oh, I can't get to where the health is in this room during this fight because I have to destroy this barrier and I got to turn off the electricity that's making the water like dangerous to, walk through because I'll get shocked and get hurt more. And so they start to layer in environmental traversal hazards with enemy hazards, and that gives lots of like interesting enemy encounters.
Yeah, no, I think that the encounters in this one were there was less environmental stuff. They kind of stuck to the, big red barrels go boom kind of thing, right? Which I think that, again, like if you're trying to create like a bespoke encounter where you're like, oh, like we want them to be kind of weighing between these three options and picking, do they want high risk, high reward or lower risk, lower reward versus like, oh, I can just grenade my way through everything. Right. So I think that's kind of more, they were creating these like small tactical environments. One of the things though, because so they didn't, most of the, there weren't a whole lot of like area puzzles. It was mostly like when you're exploring, the main thing that you're doing that makes exploring fun is looting, not puzzle solving, So like what's really enjoyable is going around and finding all of the little boxes to have all the little stuff in it. And sometimes you got to pick the lock on a box and you got to figure out whether or not you want to use your lock picks, which are called mag somethings, but lockpicks. Use your lockpicks to see what's in there, and that kind of stuff. So that was the joy of exploration, because occasionally you'd find like a box hidden away somewhere, and it had that good stuff, Also, I'm curious on how they handled this in yours. How abundant is ammunition?
Well, I would say it is on the scarce side. My lived experience was that it was incredibly scarce because I am a bad shot and the enemies take a lot of bullets to kill. So I think because the game skews sci-fi horror, right? Like you're suddenly monsters and then you have to deal with that.
Suddenly monsters are standing beside you. Oh God.
Oh God. Yeah, no, exactly right. So you have a not quite Resident Evil level of like every bullet counts, right. But it matters. Like you cannot just go into every situation with grenades, because even though you get grenades, like you could maybe solve a room that way, right, but not the room after that.
Right. Yeah. So in this one, and that's, kind of typical of survival horror. I mean, very similar to The Last of Us, where it's like you get like 9 bullets.
Right. I would say Last of Us is way closer to like a Resident Evil.
Right.
Like you got to manage your whole inventory down to the square.
Yeah. Where you're just like terrified that it's like, oh man, I've got this really awesome gun that I'm never going to use because what if I need the bullets later? I mean, and the fact that in that game they made the Molotov cocktail out of the same stuff that makes your health supply item was so just good. Brilliant and hateful. It's like, oh, I hate that they did that. That's pretty good though. Anyways, this game initially I thought it was going to be very similar, and I don't know whether it's because I am an amazing shot, right? I'm not, but like because I was a decent shot, I wasn't running into ammo problems, or because they had a particular mechanic that I was just made me go, huh. So at the beginning, you're finding ammo here and there, and there's not a lot of it, so you kind of have to switch between. You have light weapons, heavy weapons, and energy weapons, and those are your 3 ammo types, right? So you had to kind of like have a good one for each category, and then that stopped being a problem because heavy weapons, right? Are like assault rifles, so you can burn through ammunition like crazy. But 2 things that I learned: one, you can also get like a minigun, right, that fires bullets on bullets on bullets, right? Is 2 things I found out. One is that the shotgun, which deals a ton of damage if you're right up in somebody's face, uses 1 bullet every time you pull the trigger, right? So I was like, oh, well, this deals the same amount of damage as 50 bullets from the assault rifle. I do have to be close to them to get it, but I was like, I'm going to use this, used nothing else, and I just hoarded so much ammunition that I had like 2,000 rounds by the time I was halfway through, and I was like, okay, I am now no longer worried about ammunition. The other thing that's interesting is that you have to equip your companions, and your companions don't use ammo. So all of the...
Oh, so you just give them the grenade launcher and the assault rifle and...
Yep.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, that's exactly why I gave them both miniguns, because it's like, look at how much damage this minigun did. I used it once. I was like, oh, God, that depleted like 20% of my ammo reserves in, like one encounter. I was like, but you guys have magic bullets, so here you go. And so between those 2 things, bullets stopped being an issue. And given the theming, I was like, I feel like they want ammo to be a little bit more scarce, especially considering that there are vending machines to where you can buy stuff, and how much the ammo costs really made me think like ammo is supposed to be scarce because ammunition costs as much as like armor in some places. So I'm like, oh, you want me to make a choice of like, do I buy a few extra rounds or do I get this awesome armor? That was never a choice. It was always the awesome armor. So, but it sounds like that yours was kind of on a scale of 1 to 10. I think mine was going for a 3 and ended up hitting like a 7 for ammunition abundance. But it sounds like yours actually was closer to like a 4 or something like that.
Yeah, I would say they probably hit the tone they were going for, unless you're not a good like if you're a really bad shot, right? Because then you can quickly find yourself in a situation where it's like, oh, I'm helpless now, right?
Does the gravity gun use ammo?
It's got its special,
right? It has ammunition. It just doesn't have rounds necessarily,
right?
Because I was just, but so basically, you could very well, if you're a terrible shot, wind up in a situation where you are just crowbarring your way through hordes of enemies.
Right. That's your Counter-Strike Go knife, right? Like you have the crowbar forever, crowbar for life. Which reminds me, I forgot to say this when we were talking about the audio visuals. So the crowbar is like the famous weapon from this game because a kid can draw it. It's iconic, right? It also makes a horrible noise whenever you hit anything, and it makes, to their credit, it actually makes different noises, right? If you are hitting a destructible thing in the environment, it sounds like metal on metal, even if you're hitting wood. When the wood breaks, it makes a wood noise, but like the crowbar hitting an object always makes the like clang. I guess it's the crowbar clanging. And then when you
clang with the crowbar.
Yes, I love that musical.
I got 2 songs in this one, man.
Yeah,
let's go for 3.
You're on a roll. But when you hit an enemy, it makes like a thwacking noise, right? Which is good because sometimes visually it really looks like you are making contact with an enemy and you are super not. So again, that sound effect is like critical for the gameplay of like, am I hitting them, right? Because there's like a little splatter animation, but they don't like recoil, right? It's not like you are beating them into submission. They pretty much do whatever they were going to do, and then once they're dead, then they fall over and die, and it's kind of an unremarkable death animation. But 1998. I do want to talk about enemy AI specifically, right? Because at this time in history, that was still like novel, and not always very good, right? A lot of enemies would just stand still and fire their gun, or they would just charge you. You actually see a bunch of variety here, right? Different enemies behave in different ways. And some of them even respond differently to you, like returning fire, right? So there's this thing that I don't know the names of like any of the enemies except the head crabs. But the head crabs will kind of run around and like try to jump at you. They're a little more brainless, but they do flank, right? So if you are like shooting at one, it will kind of jump at you. And then when it, like if you knock it off, it'll like go to the side and try and jump at you like from that angle. So it's very, very rudimentary, but I mean, it matters because they're small targets. So like even just that little bit of movement is like hard.
Right.
And then there's these big things that look kind of like, sort of like dogs with like Demogorgon mouths, like big, creepy, predator mouth. And they will charge you and like spit acid. And then if you shoot at them enough times, they will kind of fall back and then use their ranged attack because now they're a further harder to hit target, right? When a scientist gets head crabbed and they turn into kind of like a zombie sort of thing, they're kind of brainless and they're super aggressive and they will just charge you, right? And the soldiers kind of act like soldiers, right? So like you get a little bit of variety, and that matters, one, just because it's more interesting, but two, because that opens up the whole panoply of what if we put one of this enemy and one of that enemy, right? And suddenly it's like, maybe that's not twice as hard. Maybe that's 10 times harder, right? And then you add in like one environmental obstacle and like, now it's so hard. Like each one of these things is not that complicated, but now this situation is like super novel and interesting. And when you pair that with, I don't have infinity bullets to just spray around this room, like you can get into some hard situations.
Oh yeah, no. And so, yes, cosign all that, and actually everything you just said had me having PTSD flashbacks to making D&D encounters, right? Because, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to add these 3 things together and that'll be fine. Because like, if you throw 3 illithids in a room, 3 mind flayers in a room, that's a moderate encounter. If you throw 3 mind flayers into a room and enough things to keep everybody else at range for a round so that way they can mind blast everyone, well, now you've got a mess on your hands. And then all of a sudden you're like, all righty, man, everybody just give me that good old-fashioned wisdom save. Oh, and everyone failed. Oh, well, I mean, just you all brought your spare characters, right? So anyways, I say all that to say that in this game, yes, there is enemy AI. And I think it's appropriate because like animals behave like animals. So most of the animals do just kind of charge you, but the humans, like they have heavies that will come up and throw a flamethrower in your face. And then they have snipers that will
the whole point of a flamethrower that you're like, I want something to be on fire over there, but I'm over here.
Well, yeah, but as far the amount of over there is still less than a sniper rifle.
That's true. A flamethrower sniper rifle would be a whole other kind of hell, though.
I think that's called Fireball.
There you go.
I didn't ask how big the room was. I said I cast Fireball. So, so the guy will come up because I think with they're using like cone effect, right, for flamethrower, right? So it's just they'll come in there and they'll like lay down the law with the flamethrower, and then and actually interestingly, the snipers, when you run up on them, like because I was using a shotgun a lot because of its ammo conservation, when you run up on them, they will actually go look for other cover. Like they will stop shooting at you and run away, And I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. I mean, it's obnoxious, but it's good from a game design standpoint. One of the things, though, I found wildly disappointing is that enemies will team up on you in ways that don't make any sense, right? So if I'm going into a marauder camp and there's a whole bunch of marauders in there doing their marauder stuff, and I'm like, all right, and I start picking a fight with them, and as I'm running away, I'm like, but behold, the indigenous creatures of the environment, and maybe if I can get them to fight each other, then I can like get to high ground and snipe them off. Oh no, and they are all walking shoulder to shoulder like the phalanxed soldiers of old come to take one step at a time as they thrust their spears into my midsection. It was like really terrifying to behold them walking. I mean, they were shoulder. There was no negative space in between them. And I'm like, are you not going to kill them?
Oh God, King Kong and Godzilla have signed a peace accord.
Oh God, how can we do this? If only we had Mechagodzilla. Now Mechagodzilla is on their side too. Quick, let's get another kaiju. Sir, do you think that maybe we're throwing good money after bad? No, more kaijus.
Where's Mothra?
But yeah, that was because again, it's really common nowadays. So, but I was curious if even the enemies, so EVE, if that existed in your game.
It does in a really limited capacity that I think shows people were thinking about it, right? So what you end up with is like this enemy can do something that will hurt another enemy. And I know they're not technically enemies, but say you're in a room with a guard.
Sure.
Right? And there's you and there's the guard. Well, if the head crabs are going after that guard, you can just leave the room.
There you go.
So the guard isn't an enemy, but he is an NPC, and you can make him an enemy if you attack him, right? You can go up to a guard and take a crowbar upside his head, and he will then start firing at you, right?
I'm impressed that after taking a crowbar to the head, he gets up and starts firing at you.
They have helmets.
Oh, yeah. See, there's the problem.
Yeah. They wear baseball caps. It says security on them.
Have you tried hitting them really hard?
Yeah. But I do appreciate, one, that you get a special line of dialogue if you like turn traitor
nice
on a guy, and they say something like what's come over you or something. You get like a little special dialogue, right?
Yeah.
But you can do a little bit of like kiting enemies around and sort of like making them turn on other NPCs, and then that NPC will join the fray. But you can't do truly sophisticated stuff yet, right? But you can tell that they were definitely thinking about it, right? They were absolutely thinking like, okay, and we actually saw this in The Last of Us, right? Is the reason there are no human and zombie encounters in The Last of Us is because the game didn't have the computational power to run both of those like processing engines at the same time, which is why the DLC has it, because they had gotten it ready for part 2, right? And so like, that's a recent game, and they were like, the AI is now so complex that having 2 models running, like one for humans and one for monsters, and now all the complex interactions between those is too much, right? So like, it's not like, oh well, 1998 they could barely figure it out. It's like, no, it's still kind of hard because you want you want your clickers to behave in a really complex and interesting way, and you want the creepy cannibal guy to behave in a complex and interesting way. And so when you put those 2 complex systems together, it's exploding complexity, right? So like the fact that you can even like kite a head crab into the room and the guard will start firing at it is like pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and again, apparently even games like Spacer's Choice struggle with with that particular issue.
Well, and just I gotta say, like, if it's supposed to be a story driven, like, immersive world, like, that is world breaking, right? Like, that it's class shattering.
Yeah.
When you're just like, oh man, I'm being chased by this enemy. I'm gonna run through this other room, even if you're not planning it, right? Because it might just happen where you're running and it's like, there's this other kind of monster. Like, maybe they'll start fighting each other, and it's like, why are they shaking hands? Like,
oh God,
you're supposed to hate each other.
Well, especially in this particular and especially in this particular situation, the thing that was happening is one of the things they let you do is they let you approach the game a number of different ways. And so Tales from Spacer's Choice, right, is so at one point you're trying to get down to a specific place on the planet, but there's multiple places you can land, right? You want to land in the safe space. So you go and you talk to a person and you say, hey, what do you need in order to give me a permit to go land in the safe space? And she's like, hey man, you give me some secrets. Give me some cool secrets from like these other areas and I'll help you out. And I'm like, okay. And so then I go and I complete the quests that she points me in the direction of. And then all of a sudden I find out that like I wasn't supposed to hand off the stuff back to the quest giver. I was supposed to hang on to it and hand it to her instead. So I went back to her. I'm like, hey, about those secrets. I don't have any secrets. And so then I tried something I did the truly ominous thing because she was like, well, hey man, go either pay me 10,000 credits or go find more secrets. So I did the truly ominous thing, which is I saved the game and then I blew her head off. And so I was like, maybe I can get this off of her body. You can't get it off of her body, right? So then I was like, okay, I don't really know what to do. Turns out you can go to the planet. You can just go to the very dangerous part and shoot your way to the safe part. It was during that my enemies created the Treaty of 24 and teamed up on me. I was like, guys, look, this was hard on its face. The fact that you're all allied now makes this nigh impossible. So that was particularly bad. But one of the things I was able to do to help out a little bit was a unique movement option that they give. And my understanding is that there are interesting movement things in your game.
No, there are bad movement things in my game.
Oh,
yeah. So I understand. Before a bunch of people send in a bunch of feedback, we do love your feedback. Please don't send me feedback about this.
Just this is a good scream outside of your house feedback.
Big time. Yeah.
That's how we want to get our negative feedback. Positive feedback, we want reviews.
Through the form.
Negative feedback exclusively by screaming outside of your house.
Yeah. See, we've evolved. So I know this was originally a PC game, which means it was originally a WASD and mouse, right? However, the sensitivity on your movement, Gordon Freeman, who is wearing like an armored radiation suit and carrying a crowbar, is also apparently an Olympic class sprinter because you go from dead standstill to full speed so fast. And normally I would say like, if you were playing like Doom 2016, I would say like, that's super handy because you can strafe around enemies and pick them off and you become a great shot. And that's how you conserve all your ammo, or you're circling around them, beating them from all sides with your crowbar. And you feel like a super cool Gordon Freeman. But because remember back when I mentioned that cool, like environmental traversal? Yeah. So sometimes you got to like walk on a narrow pipe. And if you fall off, you fall into poison radioactive water. Sometimes you gotta like jump over a narrow chasm, but it's the stupid first person shooter thing of like, so you're gonna run up to the chasm staring at your feet so you can jump at the last possible second, right? And you can just barely make it over.
How do you jump?
Yeah, I
oh God, is that what I've been doing wrong?
I don't live in a first person shooter apparently. But there's just so many places where his speed is problematic. And like, it's in all directions, right? You back up at full speed, you go side to side at full speed. And so, yes, I know that with a keyboard and mouse, I could line myself up in a perfectly straight line and then float my hand off the mouse and just hold down W and go in a perfectly straight line. But there's no way that would solve all of the problems. Some of them, certainly, but not all of them. And that caused a spike in difficulty related to some other spikes in difficulty we're going to talk about in a minute that caused a cascade failure.
Nice. Yeah, no, so there That stinks. Not so much that particular problem. One thing that this game does is you can walk and sprint, which is always a plus, right? Except for games like Doom, where it's like I need to be sprinting all the time. I never want to walk, right? So you can walk and sprint, and actually there are perks you can get that increase your walking and sprinting speed. So if you don't like how slowly you're going, you can change that in game, and you feel smart for upping the mechanics. Or if you're entirely okay with it, you can leave it alone. But one of the interesting things is that at the top of the hour, I'd kind of said like this is Fallout in space with capitalism, right? One of the things that really turned me on to first-person shooters in general was Fallout 3 because of the VAT system, right? Because that way, and again, like to your point, if you're getting overwhelmed with head crabs, or if all of a sudden like you accidentally step in the poison or what have you, right? You're just in it, you know? The VAT system would allow you to kind of like take a pause and take a moment. This one has TTD mode, if I remember correctly, which is like temporary time dilation or something like that.
An in-universe contrivance for a similar thing.
Correct. Actually, the specific in-universe contrivance is that you have been on ice because you were like cryogenically frozen. And it's a side effect of you thawing that he is pretty sure won't be a problem, you know? So, and I like that because it's like, oh yeah, that's not good. You shouldn't be able to do that. But it probably won't kill you. So I always love it when they take a positive thing and like frame it as like, oh no, like practically this is negative, but it's positive. Anyways. So the nice thing is that you can press R1 and it just slows everything down to a crawl, which gives you a minute to like collect yourself, you know? And I think that that's a really good mechanic. And the nice thing is that like you can use it. And I think if you just stand completely still, it goes down really, really slowly. But the minute you start shooting or moving, it goes down way faster. Right. And then the other nice thing is, so I am decent at first person shooters, right? I probably used that mode maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire playthrough. I just didn't use it, right? There was a bunch of things you could do to make it more powerful, and I just never picked any of those feats because I didn't use that ability, right? But it's nice to basically kind of like, we've talked a lot about difficulty and modulating difficulty, and that's the thing that makes the game easier, right? And so not only is it like, hey, we're going to let you play on normal, right? And here's a way to make the game even easier. You can use time dilation mode pretty regularly. And if you want the game to be even easier, pump a bunch of feats into time dilation and it'll make the game even easier. So like that way you don't feel like it's like, hey, baby pee pants, why don't you play on super easy mode? It's like, hey, no, I'm playing on normal mode, but I've managed to inch that closer to easy mode by picking all of these things that help me play the way I want to play.
And this is something I had in my notes framed in a slightly different way, but is relevant to exactly what you're saying, which is this game is from, not only is it a PC game, but it's from the era of PC games where manual saves were life, right?
Yes.
Like, that was how you interacted with the game, right? Mm-hmm. The version I played, I don't know if the original, but the current version that's on Steam does have autosaves, but they're pretty far apart, right? Yep. They're like significant, like loading screens. It'll pop an autosave. And they're fast and it's better than nothing. Right. But like, unless you are very good at the game or very sure about what you have to do next, because remember, like there's puzzles, you gotta like figure this thing out, right? Then you are probably not only saving, but like save scumming, because that was part of the expected culture. It was
expected, yeah.
Right? And so there are not really any other attempts to modulate the difficulty because there's no RPG elements, right? So I mean, that entire set of mechanics is just straight out,
right? Whereas in this one there were a ton of RPG mechanics,
right? Your weapons don't upgrade. You have a fairly small arsenal in total, right?
In this one you have a huge arsenal, and all of your weapons upgrade and are moddable,
right? Yeah, so like and better or worse, I don't know, but
it's not the same.
But you do find yourself in a situation where basically your one and only tool is get better at the game. Mm-hmm. And there is something to that simplicity, right? It's like, hey man, you gotta run the 40 in 6 seconds. I have no idea what a good 40 time is. That sounds really fast.
I mean, kilometers, meters.
The 40 yards. It's a football. You played football.
What? I played left bench, man. Let's all be honest with ourselves.
Okay,
I can tell you how big the bench is.
I'm just shocked that like I knew a sportsism that you didn't know. Yeah, so 40 is like
yards. Anyways, yeah. Whatever.
40-ish meters,
plus or minus.
Yeah, so that's like a way you measure like a football player's speed. It's like how fast can you run 40 yards?
That's so arbitrary and silly.
Okay, do you want me to cut this out and put in the 100-meter dash?
Yes. So anyways, what was the point about video games you were trying to make?
If you can only run the 100-meter dash in 30 seconds, again, I have no idea what a good 100-meter dash time is.
Yeah.
Then the only way to run a faster 100-meter dash is to be able to run a faster 100-meter dash, right? That is essentially the thing that a game like this poses to you, right? That's also what a game like Mega Man or Mario poses to you. Bowser behaves in this way, and you got to deal with it, right? You can get your one additional hit point, but you can't really do much of anything in the original Super Mario Brothers to make Bowser easier to fight other than getting better, right? So it is not a knock against Half-Life or this genre or this era of games to say that. It just means that's your only tool, right? And so you either become a better shot and get better at maneuvering and take less damage, or it's kind of it. Maybe if you're lucky and you save scummed properly, you can go in with more health or more armor because you got full health and full armor, and then you had a bad encounter, and then the encounter after that killed you. So you cheese that first encounter so that you have more health and armor for the second encounter. But like, that's kind of it, right?
Well, and even then, you still have to get good enough to be able to get through that first encounter.
Exactly. Yeah. If there's a 10 encounter long encounter chain before they offer you more health and ammo, like, you get good. Like, there's just not really any way around it. So like, I love that. Like, I like RPGs, right? I like my avatar getting more powerful and me becoming better at the game. And there are plenty of games I've played that I just had to get better, but I tend to prefer personally if I can also like cheese up my avatar a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I like agreed. And I like it when, it's like, hey, I can walk into an area, level 40 that was supposed to be level 20, and then just not pay attention, not be super focused. And one of the things that this game did that I do love in RPGs and games of this nature is that what I described before, where they were like, hey, you want to go to this planet and you want to land in the safe zone. Here's the way to do that. But champ, if you want to just go there, go for it. You're not supposed to. That's not what you're supposed to do. And it says like, warning, dangerous, and all this other sort of stuff. But I went that route, right? And I enjoyed it because then I was like I was saving a lot, right? Because you do manually save in this game as well. I was saving a lot, and I died a lot, and I was like, this is to be expected because they told me I'm not where I'm supposed to be. But then by the time I got to the town, I was this wasteland bullet wielding, shotgun wielding maniac. And I was just like, somebody was like, I don't know if you can get that cow out of that tree. And I'm like, I can by shooting it at the base with all of my shotgun shells until the tree falls over, because that's a thing I can do, so I agree with you. I really do like that. There's a couple of things that I thought that this game did that were particularly noteworthy. One of them is, and I wanted to get your kind of feedback on this, because in many cases, you will lockpick a thing, right? So like there's a container, and and containers require a certain number of lockpicks to use, right? So lockpicks are like a resource that you have, right?
Sure. And
so like this container is hard, so it requires your skill to be high enough to even attempt it, and then it will require like 5 lockpicks. And sometimes within those are additional lockpicks, right? Like so at first I was like, okay, so if it costs 5 lockpicks to open this thing and there's 2 in there, why not just make it cost 3, right? But then I kind of came around on that, and I was like, I kind of like that, because it's like, oh man, this costs 5 lockpicks. That's a lot. But then the devil on my shoulder says, but what if there's lockpicks inside? And the angel says like, but what if there isn't? And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't. Okay, I'm going to roll those bones. Or like you open a door to a room and there are lockpicks in the room, right? But it's like, now I feel clever, because most morons would have just lockpicked the room, gone in there, spent their 5 lockpicks, opened this one thing and left. But I'm smart, and I looked around, and it made me feel smart, even though like realistically the devs were probably like, this should only cost 3, right?
So it's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah. Right? So I was interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, it's 100% the journey, not the destination, because mechanically, if you said opening this box that has 10 shotgun shells and 2 lockpicks in it costs 5 lockpicks, you could remove 2 of those lockpicks from the equation and say it costs 3 lockpicks to get 10 shotgun shells. But that's not the same.
It's
right?
not.
Because you don't know that there's 10 shotgun shells and 2 lockpicks in there. Right. So emotionally, super different.
Yeah.
Right. And this is this isn't really present in Half-Life in a significant way, other than the mechanic of time, where like you're in a facility that's got like crates and stuff, but you can smash them open and they often have goodies in them, but a lot of times they don't, right? And you had better be smashing them open, not shooting them open, because you don't want to waste your ammo, right? So you got to switch to your crowbar, and like that's your love language is the crowbar. It's how you interact with the world, right?
Woof. Sorry, I was just thinking about how quickly that get you landed in jail.
Oh, super fast. Yeah.
My love language is crowbar. What?
Yeah. So I like the of if I smash open all these crates, maybe I will get some goodies, but that is reductive enough that for a more mature player, that stops being interesting very fast, right? If you have a little lockpicking minigame, if you've got to hack the security locks on the camera so you can go into the room without being seen by the guards or whatever, like even if the end result in the math is the same, like I spent this much time, I spent this much resources, and I finished with this much loot, there is something very different to it being, the journey is interesting, right? Walking a winding path that's a mile long and walking a straight path that's a mile long are not the same path, even though they're both a mile, right? And so the first few rooms I was in that had a bunch of crates, like I smashed the crap out of those crates.
Yeah.
And then eventually, even though ammo was scarce, I was like, there's 20 crates in here. Who can be bothered?
Yeah, right. Like I can't smash all these crates. And one of the things that the game did that's interesting is that like, so you've got like, I think a total of like maybe 15 or 20 different skills that you can put skill points into. But one of the things they did that was really interesting is so like as you increase your lock picking skill, you can pick more difficult locks, right? That's pretty standard. But every skill also had like a tack on thing. So for example, lockpicking, eventually, like when your lockpick skill gets to like 80, you get a preview of what's in the crate, right? Like little things like that. One of the ones that I thought was really cool is that you have your dialogue options are persuade, lie, and intimidate, right? You can put points into those. And I beefed those out because I was really enjoying talking my way out of problems, especially, intimidate when the person's like, do a thing. And I'm like, hey, that's a great way to get yourself killed, buddy. And then they're like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But the thing is, I still wanted the experience. So I killed them anyways. That's not the point. The point is that, if you get your, I think, intimidate or persuasion high enough that like the first time you shoot a bad guy, they have a 20% chance to cower for 10 seconds. So like the dialogue options actually impact combat as well. And I'm like, that's kind of cool, So I thought that was all pretty neat. One of the things that they did here for like from like an inclusion standpoint, I think is really good. Now, disclaimer, we are both straight white men, right? So like I'm going to do my best to talk about this in a way that I think is good, but I think that this is, I believe this was inclusive. If somebody is of this demographic and you disagree, please let me know and I'll adjust fire, right? But they actually, one of the companions that you have has a romantic storyline, which is cool, right? But she is asexual, and they handled it, I thought, in a very good way, which is that it's not the thing that defines this character. As you're talking to her, she's like, I am really into this other person. And like her side quest is like, you go like you're helping her through this relationship because she's all socially awkward and all this kind of stuff, right? But one of the things that she mentions is she's like, yeah, I'm also concerned because I'm not into the physical aspect of relationships, and that has caused me issues in the past. And then they hand that off to you, the player, and be like, how are you going to approach this, right? And so you talk her through it, and then, you can talk about it a little bit more, but it's not like this is the asexual character, right? And I was just like, this is, I think, a nice way to, be inclusive without beating people over the head and like being reductive in like, oh, if you have this personality trait, that is the only thing that defines you, which I thought was kind of nice.
I think it's real lazy whenever anything about a person is the only thing about that person. Like this person who is not a straight white man, all that matters is their race or their gender, right, or their orientation or their religion or whatever, right? Like even straight white characters in TV and movies or books that like, it's like, oh, I'm a Christian and I'm a good Christian. And it's like, that's it.
That's all you got going.
Is there a kind of food you like? Is there kind of music you hate? Like you have nothing else going on. Yeah. Like I always find that to be super lazy. And I think it's particularly offensive when it's like, oh, I, the writer, am going to take this marginalized group that I may or may not be a part of and I may or may not have consulted anyone who's in that group, and make a character who like that is the only thing about them. They're a one-dimensional stereotype of being black or gay or a woman or whatever. So the fact that they did that in a way that seems at least thoughtful at all, I think is really cool. The second thing is the fact that they chose something that is there is a correct term for this, and I'm not going to try to guess at it, but basically like a thing you can't tell by looking. Right. Like you can see someone in a wheelchair and be like, that person has a disability, right? You can see someone who is, presents as male or female, and probably especially if they're performing their gender, you could probably make a good guess, right? Generally, people can't hide their race, right? Like there's certain things that are easy to say like, and then we have this whole subplot about a Chinese lady, and it's super obvious that she's Chinese and a lady, but that character never has to tell you that they're asexual, right? And they're not aromantic, because that's a different thing. Like they still want to be in a romantic relationship. And to even then, because the question I was going to ask you was, did they do the lazy thing and make them of a race that is asexual? So then we as the humans get to look at them and be like, it's weird. I don't understand how a race could be asexual. But it sounds like this is a humanoid. Yes. And other people in their race are sexual, and they just aren't.
Well, so interestingly, in this game, only humans. So it's all
just straight, only no aliens,
no aliens.
Just alien animals, I guess.
Yes, yeah. So there are,
but no other humanoids.
Yeah, there are no other intelligent aliens.
Okay.
And actually, there is actually one subplot where like a person's like, this corporation's doing thing A, and then this other person's doing thing B, and that doesn't make any sense. And you're like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And she goes, yeah, you know why? Aliens. And most of your responses are, you're crazy, right? So, which is nice, because that's good world building, because it's not like aliens are around. Like, this person's crazy for thinking that aliens are up to shenanigans, and it turns out that they almost certainly were. Crazy, not up to not aliens. So yeah, no, she is a human. And again, I felt that the way that it came up was very organic, because she's somebody you pick up, and her backstory is like, her father died when she was young, and she was basically raised by a corporation, So even though the corporation has been horrible to her, she still has like this weird kind of like mild allegiance to them, because that's all she's ever known. And she's like raised out in the sticks and kind of like a country bumpkin kind of a thing, right? But she's really good with like engineering. So she does feel like kind of a holistic character, but she just mentions it as like, and so she views you as like this worldly space captain, right? And so when she's telling you about why she is so nervous about talking to this person, it is just one of the things that she lists as like, I'm worried, I really like this person, and I'm afraid this is going to go sideways, because she's just going to view me as a country bumpkin, because she's going to think I'm an idiot, because I don't like the physical part of relationships. And I'm like, that's kind of how that would probably come up in a conversation, not just like...
As long as they're not a one-dimensional stereotype.
Right, yeah. It wasn't like when she joined my party, she was, had a banner that said asexual, like, I'm inclusive, right? So when I saw that, I was like pleasantly surprised, right?
And I don't think that, because I mean, one of the biggest differences between what you played and what I played is that they leaned way heavier on the story and then added a lot of mechanics and elements to support that, right? All the skills, the dialogue trees, right? All that stuff is like, there's more energy spent on story stuff, not just pew pew, right? Which is, again, not good or bad. It's just like, that is a fork that evolutionary tree took. It's hard to say whether or not they were thinking about that much in the Half-Life universe, beyond the fact that there are at least people who are not just white, right? It's not just all white men who are all like 38 years old.
Right.
So that, and that's, I mean, that's a low bar. And I'm not trying to decry anyone at Valve, but it's like, yeah, okay, there are black scientists. Like, that I could think of movies I've seen with scientists where there were somehow no black scientists. So like, the fact that they even took the time to like make a whole second model. So it's like, okay, we're only going to basically have these two scientists, and we want to show that not only old white men are scientists, right? So that to give them the benefit of the doubt, that shows like somebody had to make that decision, then tell an artist to make that model, then model that model, then find a voice actor for that model, right? Like, they didn't just pick someone from central casting and say, oh, look, we were inclusive. Like, that to have a character in the game means they had to do all the things to make that character, right? So like, I will at least give them points for that. It's obviously to a much lower level of sophistication, but it's people have done less.
Yes. And the last thing I kind of wanted to mention about the story, I thought that they did an amazing job with all the story and lore in Outer Worlds, because again, the whole thing is like, it's like capitalism run amok, especially on the frontier, is bad. And that is probably would be true in real life, but it's certainly true in this universe.
Probably true.
I'm a scientist, man. You know, like I can't
Okay.
say certainly true.
Sure,
but yeah, I would say I would be reasonably confident that is the way that would play out. So I say all of that to say that there are many exemplars of this, but there was one that I hadn't shared with you yet that I thought was really interesting, and you can get all of this lore through like email correspondences on like computers and stuff, and it's great. But one of them is they we're developing a new toothpaste, right, in like the scientific lab area, right? And one of the issues was that in too great a quantity, the toothpaste could cause blindness, right, in some of their test subjects. But they were going to continue to pursue it because blindness, they're not super worried about. And it's a email correspondence like back and forth between people. And they're like, yeah, we're not too worried about the blindness. But the reason why this toothpaste that they were making is so amazing and important is because it turned out that before they went blind, they lost their appetite, right? And so they were like, this toothpaste, if used in small enough quantities, is an appetite suppressant, right? And they wanted to make that. And the amazing thing is not because it would save them, not because they would make billions of dollars of people trying to lose weight, but because then the colonists would require less food.
Dark.
Right? And I was just like, yep, all of that seems like, cold, heartless corporate decision making, right? But when you read that, you're like, okay, this corporation is evil. And as you kind of go through and you're like, oh, kind of all of the corporations are evil, and they're evil in their own little different nuanced ways of like what they focus on. And for example, one of them like is a transporting agency, and man, it is really important that all these laws are followed, except for the fact that they are going to hire you to do some extrajudicial murdering because they need it done,
So before I go on to this thought, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to share this thought with you, and then this will naturally force my hand into the closing for reasons that will become apparent. In the Half-Life universe, I would argue that like evil corporations kind of also the villain, right?
Yeah.
Because you're in the Black Mesa Corporation and they're doing super science and then monsters from beyond our reality and they start eating people's heads, right? And then, then you got head crabs. And
That's not what you want.
Nobody wants that. But very quickly on the back of the science going wrong, the next immediate enemy is not, oh God, monsters. It's the government. Because again, one of the few lines of dialogue they chose to record because it was relevant to the story and it's delivered in environment by an NPC that if you murder him, I guess you would just never hear him speak this line, is he says, the government is, because they're like your whole facility is underground, right? So you're trying to get up out of like the silo in the beginning part of the game. And he says, oh, the government is here and is killing everyone. Because the easiest way to cover up that this happened would be to kill everyone.
Right.
Right. And so you very quickly go from, monsters are scary to the real monster is man. Right. and then they continue to kind of play back and forth with that idea of like, yes, the monsters are threatening and they are absolutely trying to kill you. But also like the humans who could ostensibly be helping you are also trying to kill you. Right. So you end up in, it's not quite like Last of Us plus zombies style where it's like there's humans are evil and the zombies are just mindless, but there's some parallel themes there, right? You got head crabs that are just trying to be head crabs and live their best head crab life. I don't think they're like particularly intelligent, but it's like the xenomorphs. That's like how they reproduce, right? That's how they make more of them head crabs. And then the humans come in and start just shooting and exploding and it's bad. But the reason I say that we must hear at the turn, like I have to leave you is because I got so not far in this game because it is so unfun in the way that it is hard.
Interesting.
So I was trying to give the game a fair shake the whole time. However, if you take each little thing I complained about and then imagine them happening constantly in every interaction, I eventually got to the point where I was just like, I don't care enough.
Nice.
Like, I don't, even though I feel like this is a game I am supposed to play to the end, because I, a gamer with a gaming podcast, can't yet say, like, yes, I've played Half-Life all the way through. I'm never going to be able to say I played Half-Life all the way through, because the movement makes interacting with certain parts of the environment incredibly unfun. And I'm not going to walk 2 steps and then do a quick save. Like, that's not fun.
Right.
I don't think that that's fun. And the encounters are balanced very much in favor of the monsters, unless you are very flight on your feet or a really good shot. And I'm not interested in becoming really excellent at the slippery, super fast way Gordon moves and dealing with his super limited ammo with the high bullet sponge enemies. And I played on easy, dude. I was getting so frustrated by the difficulty and early on in the game,
right,
that I actually was like, you know what? This is an early PC game. I bet there's console codes. And I spent 5 minutes figuring out how to do that on my Steam Deck so that I could turn on God mode. And then I played on God mode for about another hour and I was like, done.
This is not fun in a different way.
I'm done. So if we're going to talk about for my game, did it hold up? No.
Full nostalgia goggles?
No. I would say nostalgia monocle only if you played this game a lot. If you played it like once or twice when you were a kid, full nostalgia goggles.
Isn't that like definitionally nostalgia goggles? Like you would have to have played it in order to enjoy it?
No, but what I mean is the person who would argue with me, it's because they've got the muscle memory.
Gotcha.
But if you played it like once when you were 9 on your dad's PC that was in the family room, like, no, when you come back and play this, it's going to be terrible.
Nice.
Because you've played a bunch of other shooters since then, and it's going to be slippery, and you're going to die a million times, and you're going to forget you have to quick save because every modern shooter saves like every 10 feet you walk, right? Like, I was sad. Like, legitimately, I was like, I want to see the story. I want to meet the G-Man. I know who that is,
right,
but I'm never going to see him in the damn game and hear his creepy, like, story wrapping up speech because I'm just going to have to friggin' watch a YouTube video. Like, it was... I am sure there are a handful of people listening right now who are just like, oh, he sucks at video games. I didn't realize that about Lyons, but he's just... And maybe I am.
Yep.
But it was a deal breaker for me. I just couldn't do some of the most basic encounters without a second try or toggling, and like not in an interesting way that I found fun. Right. So I want to say full nostalgia goggles. So get full nostalgia goggles. Like, no caveats. Yeah. Full nostalgia goggles. I am bummed to say that. And I am curious because Half-Life 2 is built on a different engine. If that would be a different experience. Yeah. So I don't want to do them back to back. But I think eventually I'm going to circle back around to Half-Life 2 and we might have to find another game for you to, and maybe we'll do another one of these, or maybe I'll just play that one on my own. But that is built on a different engine. So maybe, but Half-Life 1, full nostalgia goggles.
Excellent. So for me, is Spacer's Choice worth playing? Is Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice worth playing? Absolutely. I enjoyed it. I would probably go back and play more of it if it wasn't for the fact that, Darkest Dungeon 2 just released for PS5, so...
Oh, I can't believe I even got you away from your TV long enough to have this conversation.
I know, right? No, I mean, like it released 2 days after I started this vacation, and literally, when I saw that was happening, I didn't, but my brain went through the machinations of transporting my PS5 to Colorado, because I was like, how would that work? And I'm like, it won't. But I had the thought. But no, I really enjoyed it. I thought that they did a great job with like the period. The DLC in particular was interesting and different. The controls handled really well. Even though the enemies will team up and curb stomp you, running and jumping and shooting and the way the mechanics play into each other are all very fun, very enjoyable, and it is free right now if you have the PlayStation Plus membership, so you're only paying with your time, and I definitely think that the time was worth it. So it sounds like that the main difference was that the Half-Life for Half-Life was pretty short, but the Half-Life for Outer Worlds is pretty long.
The curtain falls, the music plays, The credits roll, then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained at the end of it all. Gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? People know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is safe. So you're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the
I'm surprised you got through that in one.